friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs podcast. I'm Ashley Elenbaas, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everyone, welcome in. Today we'll be talking about Blue Vervain, which is an incredible plant for tension, stress, for hormonal fluctuations, for sleep, and a whole variety of things. We'll talk about its energetics, its traditional uses, its related cousin, European vervain, and I'll share with you a bunch of details that will help you learn and understand how to best use this medicine. Before we dive into today's content, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please take a minute, click subscribe. If you find this video to be helpful, click the like button and share it with a friend. All right, thanks everyone. Let's begin. I went out to my garden just a minute or so ago because this plant will wilt pretty quickly. This is Blue Vervain. Blue Vervain is a herb that I use in my practice a lot. I would say if I was stranded on an island and I had to pick 10 herbs, this herb would be on my top 10 list. And you'll see why, because it has just about everything you need for daily use and also for those things that crop up that you might not be expecting. The Latin name of this herb is Verbena hastata, and it is related to Verbena officinalis, or the more common vervain as it's found in Europe. So I think about vervain and blue vervain as cousins. We can think about the European vervain as a gentler and more mild version of our own Verbena hastata. It has lighter colored flowers, more like a kind of light purplish mauve, as opposed to the Verbena hastata flowers, which are very purple. And it gets the name blue vervain because it kind of has a little bit of maybe an indigo. You can see that the color here is more of like a bluish indigo rather than a true blue or true purple. I want to show you just how big this plant is. I harvested it maybe like 15-20 minutes ago, but look at how tall it is. So here's the bottom and watch how tall. If I put it on the ground from where it was growing, it's probably about as tall as me. I'm 5'2", so I'm not the tallest person, but this herb can get up to 6 to 8 feet tall. This one in my garden right now is pretty close to about 5 feet or maybe 5.5 feet. Verbena hastata has very pointed leaves. You can see it has these sharp serrated leaf edges. The leaves are quite long and the leaves grow opposite on the stem. They grow in pairs off of the central stem. Another key feature is the flower head, which has a bunch of flowers that grow off of singular stalks, if you can see that here. This plant is in the Verbenaceae family. So it's in the vervain family. It's not in the mint family. It's not in the aster family. So it has its own plant family that has a number of related species. One name that we often hear of when we think of blue vervain is the simpler's joy, and that is actually referring to its European counterpart or regular vervain or verbena, which was used by a lot of herbalists as a standalone remedy. And this is really important because as an herbalist, I like to blend herbs often and put things together to bring out certain qualities of plants. But blue vervain is one that I often use completely on its own. So it was called the simpler's joy because it is a standalone medicine and remedy that can be used for various different conditions. One condition specific to this plant is tension. If you look at the plant itself, it's starting to wilt because it does that pretty quickly once it's cut, but has a very strong upright stem. And when it is first picked, all of these little flowers are standing up on end. And so it has this pattern for tension and for uprightness. And when I say uprightness, this also means of personality and character. So people who are very proud, who stand upright, who have conviction, who have fortitude, that uprightness in personality. This herb works really well for people who hold that uprightness so tightly that it creates tension in their jaw, tension in the neck and shoulders, really a sense of rigidity throughout the system and rigidity in the mind. If it's helpful, you can think about people who love lists. These are the people who like to make a to-do list of their to-do lists. They love to organize, put information down. They like to check off the box. These are like your classic overachievers. They do really well with Blue Vervain. For people who have a difficult time falling asleep because their minds keep thinking about their to-do lists and tasks, this is a really nice one for helping the mind relax. It is not a relaxant in that it makes you drowsy, but rather it relaxes the mind's grip of control, of trying to manage every single task. I have a daughter who is a Virgo rising, and she loves to make lists, and she often is thinking about the next day and all the things she wants to do or needs to do or the things she did do the day before. And this is one that I keep on her bedside. So when she starts to get that grip and not being able to let go and relax her mind and relax the body, I'll give her 3 drops on her tongue, and that will just sort of take the edge off and help her fall asleep. In the Druid tradition, vervains were used as sacred herbs that were used in ritual and ceremony and also as protectors. You would often find vervain over a baby's cradle, at the doorway, maybe a wreath even made out of a rounded, let's see if I can even do that. So like making a beautiful wreath out of the dried plant material to protect a threshold or a doorway as you walk in. We can use the native North American Blue Vervain in the same way. We can use it in ritual. We can use it in healing baths. We can use it in wreaths as a protector. And a lot of herbalists, myself included, consider the Blue Vervain, the North American, to be superior because it is a lot stronger in its bitter glycosides, and a lot of the medicinal actions are actually a lot stronger and more potent in the North American vervain. It is one of my favorite spasmolytic herbs, which means it really helps with cramping and tenseness in the muscles. I like to use this herb in tincture form. So that's actually what I'm going to do with this plant right here, is I'm going to use all of the aerial parts, chop it very fine, and then add brandy over top and let that sit for about 4 weeks. When it's done, I'll strain it and then use it as a drop dose remedy for tension, for headaches, for jaw clenching, and also for my daughter for sleep. Energetically, Blue Vervain is cooling. And I love that because it's really good for hot-headed types, especially those who like to point the finger at other people and tell them what to do, but then they have a hard time doing it for themselves. Do you know any of those people? Are you one of those people? I can point the finger at myself because, a lot of Blue Vervain type people have really good ideas and judgments about other people. And I don't really judge other people. I have way too much Aries to care. But I do sometimes think to myself, if only that person could do this, then that problem would go away. And as soon as, it's like they say, when you point one finger at someone else, you're pointing 4 fingers back at yourself. If you're judging other people, really, you should be pointing that energy back at yourself. And Blue Vervain helps with that. It helps you say, hold up, wait a minute. Let's not think about what other people need to do, and let's just get our own ducks in a row, or let's make our own list and really follow through with it. So if you're someone who's really good at making lists, but maybe not completing them, then Blue Vervain can help you complete them with ease. Or maybe you always complete your lists, but you're like, doing it like this, you're clenched and holding and constipated, right? Because you're holding on so tightly that you can't find ease and flow and movement. And this herb is so good at that. It's really helpful for finding the flow. And this plant, as it grows nice and tall, it will bend in the wind. So it has this ability to be resilient and adaptable, even though it's also very strong and upright. This herb is also really good for female hormonal issues. And Nicholas Culpeper, a medical astrologer from the 1700s, considered this herb to be an herb of Venus. And he was actually speaking about the European vervain or Verbena officinalis. But again, they're so closely related. A lot of Western herbalists, we consider this to be an herb of Venus too. It's really good for menstrual cramps, for hormonal dysregulation. It's wonderful for postpartum depression, where if you, after you have a baby and the hormones are kind of all over the place, you just feel kind of manic and also just really heavy and maybe disconnected from the baby. This can be a really nice one to help you open up that flowing line of communication between you and your baby, and also that flowing communication upward between your spirit and God or the heavens above. So it opens up both this sort of horizontal and this vertical plane of communication. I've used Blue Vervain in formulas for women who are going through menopause. It can be very helpful for those menopausal fluctuations, but also through puberty. So for younger women who are starting to experience emotional dysregulation and mood swings, this can be a really nice one for helping to temper those very dramatic mood swings. Some interesting modern research is that research has shown that Blue Vervain extract can help with delta waves during sleep. It can really increase those delta wave patterns to help people experience very deep, lasting, and restful sleep. I mentioned the energetics, that this herb is very cooling. It is also very bitter. So that's something to be aware of when you're thinking about taking Blue Vervain as a medicine. As a very bitter herb, it is not the best tasting. So therefore, it is best in tincture form or glycerite form if you don't use alcohol. It doesn't make the best tea. However, I will tell you a story of my own personal use with this herb. When I was visiting some family in Michigan, I was having terrible neck pain and my neck was almost locked. And I found this herb growing right along the roadside. And I pulled over to the side of the road. I asked the plant if I could pick it. It said yes. So I just took a few stalks, dried it, and that night it was dry enough for me to brew a tea. And boy, that was the most bitter tea I have ever drank. But within a few hours, my neck was starting to, I could really feel the relaxation. And by the next morning, I had full range of motion of my neck again. And that was pretty amazing. It did start to tense up throughout the afternoon. I made myself another cup of Blue Vervain tea. And I probably did, maybe about this much of the dried flowers and maybe, 3 or 4 leaves, not much. So a total of maybe 3 tablespoons of the fluffy dried herb in about 2 cups of hot water. I let it steep for about 20 minutes. So it was strong. And it just, there's something about that acrid, bitter taste when it hits your taste receptors. It creates almost this like shivering effect. And that shivering, like a dog shivers after it's been playing or wrestling. You know how dogs kind of shake off that energy? It does the same thing in our bodies. So our bodies will kind of shudder and shake after tasting that really bitter, acrid taste. And this sends a relaxation response through the muscles of the body and also down the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve sends a signal to the brain to tell the brain to relax. So it has this full body relaxation effect, but we have to taste it in order to get that. So whether you take it as a tincture or brew the dried leaves and flowers as a tea, it's the taste that is so important. So if you taste it and you're like, ugh, know that that is part of the medicine. The taste is also a little bit drying, so be aware of that. If you tend to run dry, you may want to use another herb alongside it or just make sure you're getting lots of water afterwards. One herb that can pair well with Blue Vervain is marshmallow root, which is also cooling and moistening. So if you brew it as a tea together, you can get this really nice effect of still getting all of the bitterness and all of the cooling medicine, but adding in the moisture from the marshmallow root so that it doesn't dry out your mouth and all of the tissues in the body. If you're taking it as a tincture, don't worry about the drying effect. It might just dry out the tissues in the mouth and it might dry a little bit in your body, but it's such a small amount of drying tannins that really what you're going to mostly get is the spasmolytic and the antispasmodic effect, which is going to relax the muscles, ease tension, and also is going to help with the hormonal balancing actions of this herb. So where will you find blue vervain? Here in the Midwest in Minnesota where I live, I'll find it alongside ponds or streams. It really likes to grow near water. And so if you're in the Midwest near lots of lakes, you'll probably see it growing really tall. You'll also find it growing in ditches along roads. So just be careful that you're not harvesting it if it's been contaminated by roadside waste or by pollutants from vehicles. Make sure you're at least 8 feet away from a car. And I would say maybe 15, 20 feet away from railroad tracks, because there's a lot of toxins that get spit out by cars and spit out by trains. If you do find it growing in an area that is likely contaminated, you can also maybe, if it's legal to do, you can dig up a small plant and just transfer it into your own yard or into a wild natural place where it can grow, and then keep your eye on it and then harvest it the next year. An interesting bit of history about this herb is the European vervain was used to forge metal and swords. What the ancient metalsmiths would do is they would make a big pot of tea using vervain and they would cool it down. Then after they would forge metal like a sword or maybe a doorknob, anything that was used for either warfare or used for protection, was then dipped into the cold or cool vervain tea bath. And it was said that the qualities in the vervain would help to fortify and forge the metal, making it strong, but also giving it an extra layer that it would strengthen the metal in a way that was aligned with spirit. I think that's just beautiful. So if you're someone who does metal work, maybe considering giving some of your metal work a cooling bath in vervain tea. I was also thinking it might be a really good thing for bathing crystals. So if you do a lot of crystal work or work with crystals, another way of cleansing your herbs can be putting it in salt water. But what about doing it in vervain water? Okay, let's talk about dosing. I mentioned before, this is a low dose herb. I would start with maybe 5 to 10 drops directly in the mouth. And if that's too bitter for you, you can add those drops to a little cup of water. So, maybe just 4 ounces of water and add your drops to that. And then you can drink that in. You'll still taste it. It will still be just as beneficial as if you put it directly in your mouth, but buffered a little bit in case you find it to be like too much. You can take these drops up to maybe 3-4 times a day, depending on what you're using it for. Typically speaking, if you're using it for something that's acute, like let's say you pulled a neck muscle or you are noticing jaw or a headache, tension pain that's very acute, I tend to go a little bit higher. So I might do 10 drops 3 times a day just until you notice relief. If you're using it for something that's more chronic or long-standing, like hormonal regulation or long-standing tension in the jaw, in the neck, in the shoulders, I would then start with maybe something more like 5 drops 3 times a day and do that for maybe about 2 to 3 weeks. And then see if you can notice some changes over that longer length of time. I mentioned that I used about 3 tablespoons of the dried herb as a tea to 2 cups of water. If you're just starting off with this herb and it's cut and sifted, you've bought it cut and sifted, then you can use about 1 teaspoon in 1 cup of hot water. Let it steep for maybe 10 minutes or so, strain it, and then drink it. Again, if it's something like a frozen neck, frozen jaw, then you can go higher. And depending on how well cut your herbs is, that will also depend on how much you use by the teaspoon or by the tablespoon. So you can just kind of like feel it out and see what your body can tolerate. If you're like, oh, that was good, but I want it stronger, then you can go stronger. This herb is generally considered to be very safe. If you do take too much of this herb, the first thing you'll notice is you might have a little bit of nausea. So you might feel a little bit of an upset stomach. Usually that passes, but do be aware of that if you are going to be using higher doses. This herb is also considered to be one that we don't use regularly in pregnancy unless it's indicated specifically by a trained clinical herbalist. Blue Vervain may interact with some blood pressure medications and some hormone treatments, so do be aware of that. There have been no reported cases of this. However, there is potential, I use air quotes, there's a potential for interaction. And I think it's always good to be aware that some herbs may, like Blue Vervain actually will lower blood pressure. So this is kind of a good thing if you're kind of on the edge of high blood pressure and you want to avoid taking a medication. You can start with 5 drops of Blue Vervain twice a day. Try that for a month and see if that helps with, again, tension, blood pressure, all of it's related, mental pressure, right? So if you can get stress levels down, hormones regulated, release tension and inflammation in the body, sometimes that can be enough to bring your blood pressure down to a healthy state. Now, if you are taking blood pressure medication, just be aware it might drop it a little bit lower than what you want. So do regulate your dosage to pay attention to those signals in your own body. A few closing thoughts about Blue Vervain or Verbena hastata is that this is a really great herb for people who hold tension. And when there's a lot of struggle with the will and the ego, and I'm not saying ego is a bad thing, like we all need a healthy ego, but when the ego and the will start to become really rigid and fixed and judgmental, then this is a great herb that we can bring in as a reminder that we can be strong, but we can also give. We can also have softness. We can go with the flow, and that's part of strength. Part of strength is being soft. And the poet Andrea Gibson, who recently passed, they have these just such beautiful poetry about this image of the heart as being soft. And they say in one of their poems, let me be softer and softer still, and let me be so soft and so open. And in another poem, they mention about letting their heart be shattered into thousands of pieces, and may those pieces take root in the cracks of the pavement and grow their own beautiful flowers. And I think Blue Vervain is something, it teaches us something similar of how do we let ourselves be very assured in who we are, but at the same time, remind us of our own softness and our own vulnerability, and that there is strength in being vulnerable. There's a gift in being soft. There's gifts in letting ourselves feel things that are hard to feel. And I think right now, specifically at the times that we're living in, there is something to be said for letting ourselves just really enjoy and be in the soft animals of our bodies, as Mary Oliver, the poet, once said, because there is enough hardness, there is enough rigidity in the world. And if we can find just even 10% softness as we walk out in the world, as we pass people in the grocery stores, just being a little bit more soft, a little bit more receptive, I think that can create a ripple effect of healing. And Blue Vervain is out there showing us, let's be strong, but let's be flexible. And I think that's a great lesson that we can all take with us as we go out and do our very important work in the world. So that's what I have for today. I want to thank Blue Vervain with all of her beautiful energy for being here with us today. If you see Blue Vervain as you're walking or hiking, say hello. And, I don't always pick medicines when I see them in the wild. Sometimes I'll just sort of like tip my hat and say, I see you. Thank you for being available. Thank you for being medicine. And even in seeing a plant in the wild, sometimes I'll just let the shoulders go, let the breath relax, let the jaw release, right? We can just see or think of the medicine, and that can be sometimes enough to help us to feel its effects. So thank you, Blue Vervain. Thank you all for watching. If you have any comments, if you've used this medicine, if you're curious and have questions about it, please leave those in the comments. I love to hear from you all. So thank you for being a part of my channel. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to click that subscribe button. It just helps other people to find me. If you'd like to hear more, I have a ton of episodes on individual plants. Go to my playlist of Herbs of the Month, and you can learn in-depth information about single plant remedies that can maybe support you on your own healing path. So thank you all, and I'll see you in the next episode.